You know the vibes. Welcome back to another episode of the Hoop Genius podcast brought to you by NBA 2K26. I know last week I told you we had a scheduling issue. We couldn't bring you the guest episode last week. So guess what? This week we're bringing you not one, but two guests. How about that? You know, Big Mo's never going to let you down. Please enjoy this episode. But before we get there, I do have a special message to share with all of you because the NBA season is well and truly underway. And you know, in between games, there's a lot of time you got to fill. And what better way to fill that void than by jumping on NBA 2K26? You can go to the new park because season 2 is in full swing. I'll be in the new park. I'll be in City Heights cooking up. You can pick up new rewards in my team, or you can continue styling out the ultimate My Player with this season's unlocks and cap breakers. I'm telling you, these cap breakers are making my player so dangerous. I've got a few builds going on. I've got a KD build, I've got a LaMelo Ball build, and now I've got an Al Horford build. You think it's crazy until you see me in the rec. I'll be grabbing all the balls, I'll be making plays for my teammates, I'll be knocking down them shots. Listen, come and mess with me on NBA 2K26. Season 2 is available for everyone, so go get the update downloading while you're listening to this episode of the Hoop Genius podcast, where we brought Bobby Marks to the show. If you don't know Bobby, he worked in NBA front offices for 20 years. He's been an insider with ESPN for a hot minute now. He shared with you some industry insights and secrets. We went behind the scenes on the famous Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett trade to the Brooklyn Nets because Bobby was a part of that trade happening. He gives the keys into how you can get a job in the NBA if you aspire to do something like that, or even a job in the media. He shared with us so much knowledge on the salary cap, how teams are going to be building their rosters moving forward. This is a must listen. I love having these guests on. They really be putting the genius part in Hoop Genius. I just be bringing the vibes at this point. Anyway, I appreciate all of you. Please do subscribe to the show, leave a 5-star review and a rating, and enjoy the episode. You know the vibes. Welcome back to another episode of the Hoop Genius podcast brought to you by NBA 2K26. It's myself, Mooncey, as always, joining me, the legendary coach Brendan Suhr, and we've got another special guest for you, a man who is putting the genius into Hoop Genius today because he's an expert with anything to do with the salary cap, cap space, all of those financial sides of things in the NBA. He was a front office member for 20 years. Since then, he's had an illustrious media career. That is Mr. Bobby Marks. Bobby, thank you for joining us.
I appreciate it. Thanks, guys. How are we doing?
We all good?
Bobby and I have known, we're both New Jersey guys. We've known each other for 30 years. We both had the honor of working with our friend and legendary of a man, but legendary human, and Willis Reed, and that was something that we share. But yeah, Bob is one of the best guys. I always tell him that if I ever owned a team, he'd be the first guy I hired because he knows how to build a team, and I appreciate him so much.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's 30. This is my 30th NBA season. I feel old just saying that, but every year, I always say every year has a different story to it, right? There's
Yes.
different. There's never.
Yeah,
every year is different.
I'm on 47.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm on 30 years alive so far, so you guys are way ahead of me.
All right, we don't need to hear from you, young bud.
Well, Bobby, you know, most people know you now. If you haven't heard of Bobby, then you're not really a huge NBA fan. If you're a casual fan, you've probably seen Bobby from when he's on ESPN breaking down anytime there's a trade or a free agent signing. He's the man they go to break down all the financial implications. Anytime there's a move, I see Bobby making YouTube videos at like 2 a.m. New York time. Anytime there's a crazy trade happening in the NBA. But let's take it back to the start of your journey because you began as an intern with the New Jersey Nets, not the Brooklyn Nets. Back then it was the New Jersey Nets. What was your basketball career or experience up to that point?
Well, I actually played football in college, American football in college, and I needed to do an internship I went to Marist College. It's up in Poughkeepsie, New York. I needed to do an internship. My grades were not great my first 2 years, and I kind of started to figure things out my junior and senior year. I needed to do an internship. I was able to get an internship working with the Nets in public relations at the time, and basically turned that internship into another internship, a second one working for Willis Reed, who was the general manager at the time. And then when they couldn't kick me out in January of '96, they said, "All right, let's keep you on board, and we're going to pay $19,000 a year." And I was like, "This is awesome." Back then, we were talking about this before we got on. basketball departments were not as big as they are now. We had 10 people, I think, total in our whole department. So it gave me the opportunity as an intern to really work kind of like a full-time job, whether it be inputting scouting reports or doing all these, working with the trainers and equipment guys and all these different, working with Willis, got me an opportunity to learn how the basketball world worked. Ironically, the person who helped, and this is what I always tell young people, about networking and meeting people. And, the person who got me the internship, who was selling tickets at the time, his name is Scott O'Neill. And Scott is the commissioner of Live Golf now. Scott was selling tickets. He was calling you out dinner and say, come see Shaq Penny play Derek Coleman in a 6-pack, like that was his role. And that is the beauty of sports as far as meeting people and networking and taking it to another level. But I really didn't start learning like salary cap and the intricacies and roster building and free agency probably until 2000 when Rod Thorne came on. Rod is the man who, was in Chicago and Michael Jordan was drafted. And that is where we had some really good years, went to the playoffs 6 years in a row and 2 NBA finals. And then Billy King came in 2010. But that is kind of my journey as far as breaking into sports. It's a lot. I always I had a call this morning with a student at Marist, people trying to break into sports. And I say, there's more opportunities for people now, but there's just so many more people who want to do it. For me, I did an internship. We had 30 people in our internship class in the summer of 95, and 29 out of the 30 went back to college. I am the only one who hung around, and I wound up, parlaying that into a full-time job.
What were the steps? Because you became the assistant general manager of the Nets, but what were the steps in between intern and assistant GM?
Everything. I mean, I did everything from, I learned how to draw up contracts. I was not a lawyer. We were using outside law firm, and we didn't want to, it was too expensive. I learned that. From that, I would go to Newark Airport when the team would arrive at night and warm up their cars when they landed. Our trainer would call me and he'd say, hey, we're leaving O'Hare, Chicago O'Hare. We're going to touch down at Newark at so-and-so. And then I'd have all the keys and I would get in my car. I was living at home and I would go to the airport and I'd warm up every person's car on the travel party. So when they landed, they can get in the car, they can take off and they can get home. But I did everything from ordering equipment to, as I said, scouting and booking travel and catering and the buses and everything in between. And then also I started learning the salary cap. I'm not a lawyer. I self-taught myself everything as far from the CBA standpoint. But that is kind of how that was like my journey into learning how everything worked in basketball operations.
That's a truly inspirational story because most NBA fans, when they think about who's running teams and who should be running teams, they often think it's like former pros are the best people equipped for it. But, you've gone from going to college and interning as a former American football player all the way up to the assistant GM level. So that's super inspirational for a bunch of, sports fans out there who want to break into the industry. If you had to give one piece of advice to a young person who is trying to get involved in an NBA front office, what would that advice be?
Don't make it transactional. Don't make relationships transactional. Build relationships. A lot of my relationships with teams, people who work for teams and agents I'm not calling them because I need something. You can always call them and just have a conversation about anything. That is probably the biggest message that I would have is don't make things transactional. Eventually, like I always give the example, when I was in Brooklyn, we were Brooklyn then, 2014, this is the year we had Pierce and Garnett and Darren Williams and Joe Johnson in that group. We needed a shooting guard. And we had studied Marcus Thornton, who played in Sacramento, shooter from LSU. And Pete D'Alessandro and I had who was the GM of the Kings at the time, had a relationship. We just knew each other. A lot of us grew up together in the business. Like we all came through it. And I called Pete and I said, hey, how was your kid's soccer game over the week? We just talked, right? Like I didn't say, hey, I need a shooting guard, man. What can you do?
Yeah.
And then finally like 15 minutes in, I go, hey, Pete, I go, what are you going to do with Marcus Thornton? You guys aren't playing that much. Like they were at it. They were in the lottery. I said, we really need a shooting guard. He goes, what would you do? I said, oh, we'd give you Reggie Evans and Jason Terry and maybe a future second. I think I might do that. Let me get back to you next morning. Like that is how the crux of relationships. And when you think of like trades, how trades come about, it's the relationship business. So my biggest piece of advice is just don't make it transactional when you talk to people.
Bobby, you're one of the very best teachers there are now, and when you went to Marist, and we have talked about this over the years, you weren't a great student. It wasn't
No.
important. Football was more important than that. But what I think that, and this is where colleges, I think, really fall short, is that the things that they were offering, no offense to Marist, but weren't interesting you then. But then all of a sudden, you come into a thing, even though you weren't a basketball guy,
Mhm.
all of a sudden, and now the environment of you have to know math, you have to know legal documents. All of a sudden, you're inspired to learn,
Yeah.
and I think we learn when we want to learn, and then you kept growing to now. There is no one better at what you do than this in this field. Okay, you self-taught yourself, but who along the way helps you in learning? Is it the Players Association where you're calling Ron, you know, who's their legal counsel? Is it NBA lawyers in the
Yeah.
NBA office? A combination of? How does one learn once you get to that spot?
I think you learn by examples, and I think you learn by I call it case study, things that have happened before in the past, and you kind of apply that to real life situations right now. None of us are perfect with the collective bargaining agreement, but we've gone through for me, 20 years in a front office and the last 9 or 10 in the media world where we've when situations arise, I can talk about it because, hey, I've lived through this experience before, and this is how we dealt with it. The CBA is I always call every CBA like an amendment to the current, so for me, I came in with the 1995 one, and then we had 2000, 2005, and then 2000. So everything has kind of been amendment, and you really don't learn until you really just go through real life exercises. Like I created this document in December, and it's free. You can download it on sportsbusinessclassroom.com, where we take every transaction that's happened in the NBA since mid-December, and I'll go in every day and I'll update it, and we'll put the transaction in the team, and then we'll apply it to how it relates to this collective bargaining agreement. And we'll use the rules of the CBA and apply that, even if a guy just signs a 10-day, and we'll explain to you what the actual rules are. And I remember doing Sports Center. This is my first year, and I was doing it. And when you do TV, they're saying we need 45 seconds of your best stuff. And I'm like, man, how do you get 45 seconds when you're talking about the CBA, right? And I remember doing it, and I was talking about like the Bird exception, which is basically it gives you the ability to retain your own free agents and exceed the salary cap. And I remember talking about it, and our host, Nicole Briscoe, she's like, nobody knows what you're talking about. No, John Smith at home has no idea you have to explain, you have to simplify it and explain it. So for me, that's like that is always, I always have that in the back of my mind when I'm up there on a touchscreen or I'm up there sitting. I did TV today, talking about the Heat and their salary and their roster, giving them my best stuff in 2 minutes and how I can kind of really just simplify it. But a lot of it is just going through, there might be something happen tonight that it's never happened before. And now I'm picking up the phone and I'm calling my network of people. Hey, run through this situation for me. Am I missing something here? So that is kind of, I wasn't a good math student, but I deal with numbers all day.
Yep.
But I love how I love the numbers part of it as far as how it relates to, I work off a spreadsheet. There's nobody inputting I'm doing everything by hand, right? I'm the hand anything. I am, I created I love doing my own research and just studying. And, for me, I have a doc that I created in August, and I did this last year. I call it a basketball diary, where I go in every day and I add my notes, my thoughts about what happened last night, and I can go through it. And maybe there's something popped analytically. Maybe Chicago's bench has been really good. And because, as we get older, I can't remember as much things, but maybe in December, I'm going to go back and be like, man, Chicago's 14-4. Why are they playing so well? Well, wait a minute. They're averaging, 45 points per bench. And I can go back and do all that. And when I'm talking and having conversations, everything is really just kind of fresh in my mind.
That's amazing that you keep all these notes and these resources. I'm just looking at the transaction sheet. Like, you've already got the Mac McClung contract, which was signed like less than 24 hours ago since we were recording this.
Let me interject. The people at Marist College, which is a great school, they're bragging about Bobby that he was one of the very best students that they ever attended. And look what an education does for you now.
Well, it's even like, I talked Tim Murray, who's their AD, and we had a conversation because we don't have a hall of fame.
No way.
No, we've had a lot of Rick Smits, right?
Rick Smits,
Duncan Dutchman. And so we're talking about it, and he's asking me if I'm interested in being on the committee. And I said, well, who else is going to be on? And he starts listening to people. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, we got some heavy hitters, who went to Marist, whether it be Ian O'Connor or Brandon Tier, guys who have been in the sports world and stuff like that. But no, Marist prepared me for, I always give credit, like, because I played football there. We had a coach named Jim Parody, and Coach P was there forever. And as I said, like, my grades were not good my first 2 years, where I couldn't play my sophomore year. But Coach P, there's always that one person in your life that just stays on top of you. And back in 1993, we had voicemail on a whole, a phone that's plugged into the wall, right? And I remember coming home from, I was working a summer job, and Coach P says, hey, got your grades, you're academically ineligible. Congrats, see you in August. Like there are always people in your life that you relate to because they've given you a chance or an opportunity, and they've kind of been in your corner.
That's amazing. With everything you do now with the CBA, and I want to talk about how that impacts everything that happens.
Yeah.
Because a lot of fans don't understand how that impacts trades. But I just want to go back to what you talked about, working through real life examples.
Yeah.
And as you can probably tell from the hoodie I'm wearing or the jerseys behind me, I'm a huge Boston Celtics fan.
Sure.
And you were involved in one of the biggest trades in Boston Celtics history. And
Yeah.
I know, sometimes I read the replies to your tweets on Twitter.
I know.
And fans love bringing that up. But I just wanted to give the audience an insight into how NBA trades come together, because sometimes there's trades where you guys are circling a guy and you really want to get this player. Sometimes an owner comes along and says that he wants this player, and sometimes you get approached with a deal. Can you take us behind the scenes of that deal in particular? Because
so
that's one of the biggest.
It is. People, we live in a social media world where it could be dangerous, and like if you're going to argue with people, it's going to be a losing argument and stuff. I always tease people. I'm like, we made that trade in 2013. Tatum and Brown were like in sixth grade at the time. Like we didn't trade them. There was a pick. Unfortunately, the pick turned into them. Those guys, like, I would feel worse if I said, like, we just traded Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and they were like, listen, no offense to the people with the Clips, like Shea, like they traded Shea.
Yep.
Like they didn't think he was probably going to be where he is now, but that was actually a live body that got traded.
Mm-hmm.
We traded the rights, but the Celtic deal that came about in February of 2000, the 2012-13 season, and Boston was not playing great. There was kind of, you started to see that this team had aged, and they had reached out to me about Pierce. That is the initial framework of it, and originally it was Pierce for Chris Humphreys, another player, and a future first. That was the framework of that. And they started winning a couple games, and then around the trade deadline, they're like, no, we're gonna sit on this, and maybe we'll talk about it in the offseason. So we play the Bulls in the first week. So during that year, Avery Johnson got let go. We hired PJ Carlissimo gets elevated and did a terrific job. I mean, he's like 34 and 19. And we lose to Chicago in the first round in 7 games, a decimated Bulls team. And it was like, probably the worst thing that could happen because we probably thought our roster was a lot better than maybe what it was. And we let PJ gets let go. Jason Kidd comes in as a head coach. And Jason was just playing for the Knicks. And we already had Brooke Lopez, and we already had Darren Williams and Joe Johnson. And Boston calls around Memorial Day, which is in May, end of May. And they said, hey, would you guys think about the Pierce deal again? I said, yeah, we would. So that was the framework. And then what happened where it snowballed was the week of the draft, Doc Rivers gets traded from the Celtics to the Clippers and then all of a sudden they call us and they'd be like, hey, we would be interested in Garnett. And that's where so now you're adding Garnett. Now we're adding Gerald Wallace. Now we got to add a pick to get rid of Gerald Wallace. Like all these different intricacies, and it just blew up. And I think we all learned a valuable lesson. Like sometimes when you're doing these deals, you don't worry about not having a safety net. Like you think you're going to be good for a long time. So the thinking in Brooklyn was we're going to be really good 13-14. We're going to be a playoff team in 14-15. We could probably keep our head above water in 15-16. And then when the summer of 2016 came, the big cap spike, when that TV money, that's when Durant went to Golden State, we would be in a position in Brooklyn, 3 years of an established team, playoff team, where we can basically kind of just retool and basically have a pick as far as free agents. What happened was we get through the 13-14 season. We lose in the second round to Miami in 5. We have a payroll of like $180 million, which was high then, luxury tax. And then ownership says, you know what? Can you guys do that at half the cost? So then we don't resign Paul Pierce. He goes to the Wizards. We eventually trade Kevin Garnett. We still had Darren Williams and Joe Johnson. Brooke was coming off a broken foot. And it's like, oh my God, we just traded 3 unprotected first. And that is the culmination. We get into the playoffs that year. We lose to a really good Atlanta team, who was the 1 seed. And then, I transitioned after that year. And then what I always say what happened is Sean Marks, who's their GM, comes in. And when Sean comes in, he has no relationship at all to what had just happened. Like, he wasn't chasing that deal where he says, oh my God, we traded all this. We got to at least be in the playoffs. We got to be in a play-in. We at least got to be a 500 team. He's like, nope, I got no relation. We're going to scrap it to the bottom. We're going to build through all these, we're going to find these, the Joe Harrises and the Karis LeVerts and these Spencer Dinwiddie under the radar guys. And they bottomed out, and those picks turned into, into Tatum and Brown.
Yeah, it was quite a time. And it's interesting how hindsight being 2020, as a Celtics fan, I remember that trade happening. It's like my world had ended because I'm like,
well, it's crazy.
Garnett, like, what the hell?
What's crazy is if you go back and you read, I hate when people grade stuff. I'm like, how the heck did people, if you go back and read the grades, I think there were a lot of A's. I think there were a lot of A's
because we got Marshawn Brooks and Chris Humphreys, and I'm like, what? We went from being one of the best teams to being now we got Chris Humphreys starting power forward. Like, respectfully to him, it is what it is. Coach Suhr, go ahead,
Bobby. When you when it happens to every one of us when you're either coaching or in the front office, inevitably ownership changes, GMs change, different people.
Yeah.
And we lose our jobs. Happened to me several times yourself. Explain.
Oh,
and this is, I think, so important to people in life, especially now what's going on in the world, where one door closes and you have to be open-minded to figure out what else can you do. And one of our dearest friends, one of our Jersey guys, is a Connecticut guy, but he wrote for our paper, The Record. Woj comes in, and you have a relationship with him, and how it really is. In my thinking, I think it's changed your life.
Oh my God, for the better. Yeah, I mean,
I don't mean that.
No, I mean, listen, I still remember the Tuesday in May the day after Memorial Day, getting a call from Billy King and saying, hey, let's meet up and talk like off-season stuff. and walking in there and him being there and the head of HR with him in a conference room with a folder. And it's like almost like a hit, like a mob hit. And I'm like, oh boy.
We can say that we're from Jersey.
Yeah. And basically saying, and when you do something for 20 years, that's the only thing you know. Like, it's the only thing I knew coming out of college. And I had 2 young kids my kids now are 19 and 16. I had 2 young kids at home, and, the Nets took care of me and they paid me for a little while, but like thinking like, what are you going to do? What do you do now? And I drove home and I went to, one of our famous diners on Route 3, and I had cheese fries and gravy and just stuffed my face and did all this stuff. And it's like, I had like this, it's almost like in mourning, right? When someone passes away, the positive for me is I had kind of been prepared because I had built up a relationship with Mike Tannenbaum, who was the GM of the Jets back then and Dolphins and now works at ESPN, and Omar Minaya, who was the GM of the Mets and now is with the Yankees. And we had taught, like, they said to me, like, you're going to go, it's going to happen. And here's and basically they told me what was going to happen. It's the grieving stages of either when you lose somebody in your life or when you lose your job. And it's the first week, what's going to happen the first week? Everybody's going to call you. You're going to feel like you're still working. The adrenaline, you're talking to people, what happened, explaining, blah, blah, blah. And people always say, hey, if you need anything, call me. Then it's the second week, it's like your friends and people who are on vacation. And then by the third week, it's your family. That's it. Because everybody goes back to their own world, right? Like they go back to their own job. And, for back then it was June and the draft was happening and free agency. And Brendan, there were times I just left my phone. I left my phone in the car.
Wow.
That I used to get.
No do not disturb mode back then.
Nope. I used to get 30 calls a day. I'd get 2, 1. So I was like, what do you do now? And I always thought like I would always go back working for a team. And then I took a month off and took my kids to school and became a dad and did all these different things I wasn't able to do. And I said, I got to start doing things. And back then, nobody was really going on Twitter, which was, somewhat saner then in 2015 than it is now. So I said, I'm going to start breaking down how trades and front offices and 140 characters and all these different things, how it works. And I started building up a following. And I started doing a little TV and I did radio and I did all these different things. And it created this niche of people wanting the thirst of transactions. People love transactions, roster building. And I had known Woj when he worked for the Bergen Record, and I saw him on the concourse of Las Vegas. And really the only reason why I was in Las Vegas was an agent named Darren Matsubara, who works for Wasserman, said, hey, you've been really good to me when you were at the Nets. He's Brooke Lopez's agent. I'm going to fly you out and just keep you in the mix, right? Just keep you in the mix. Get you some people. Because once you fall off the map, you fall off the map, people forget about you, right?
Man,
and
I remember
so
different to what my friends tell me to come to Vegas for.
and so I'm on the concourse and Woj sees me. He goes, man, I really like what you're doing. At you're doing all these tweets and these breakdowns and all this stuff. And he says, yeah, we're starting this group at Yahoo called The Vertical. And we need a guy who can front office background. It's myself and this 21-year-old named Shams Sharania. Shams was in college at the time.
How about that?
And Chris Mannix and Jonathan Gavoni, Mike Schmidt's draft guys. And he's like, but you got to learn how to write. And I was like, what? I was like, 140 characters? No. He goes, no. You got to learn how to write. I did not take writing serious. I don't even think I took a writing class. I always tell people, learn how to write. So I go out to California, LA, meet with the Yahoo people. They offer me a job. Job doesn't start till January. In the meantime, I did some freelance work with Hoops Hype, and they paid me $500 an article. And my first article I ever wrote was in the summer of 2015, how Golden State can land Kevin Durant in free agency.
Wow.
But Brendan, I had no idea, and Mo, I had no idea how to write. I knew I could do it in 140 characters, and I literally stared at my computer, and my wife's like, what's the matter? And I was like, I don't know how to start a paragraph. I don't know how to write the intro. I don't know. And then you start word counting. And she said, just throw all your ideas on a piece, just throw them all. Like you're painting, like you're making clay. Just, just throw it all on there. And that's how I did it. I just
Pretty
threw all
smart
my
girl.
ideas and then I pulled it back. And that is how I was able to kind of make this article into something that made something sense. So that is the break I got in my second life. And it has been a terrific journey. It's always a challenge. And I got to see my son is in college and he wrote the nicest letter to me when he graduated. And he was like, thank you for being present.
Wow.
Because like I remember how like having this conversation with my wife, and Brent, you know this, like you're there at home, but you're not there.
You're not there.
You're like worrying about who's playing right now and why we've lost 5 in a row, and I don't feel like talking at dinner, and I, you know, like all these different things and stuff like that. And so that has been, and that's, as I said, like it's opportunity, it's networking, it's people giving you a chance, it's people giving you an opportunity. And that's why I love, you know, like, listen, my DMs are open on Twitter and Instagram and all these different, and LinkedIn, because I love trying, you know, listen, I'm on the back 9 of this journey that we're doing and how to give back. And, you know, the next sports, you know, cat person out there or someone who wants to talk basketball or anything like that. I just kind of I love the process of giving back.
So I'm huge on education. When I went to Montclair State University, I wanted to be a teacher. My only goal in life was to be a high school coach because my high school coach was UB Brown.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all I wanted to be because that was the role model. Never have, it's on my bucket list still, Bob. I've never been a high school coach, go right into college. But I now in teaching coaching coaches, what you're doing, and I think is the most needed thing right now of basically teaching people that have a desire to be in a front office or of the myriad jobs that we have in the league of, and you and your staff and the people at SBC have done an incredible job. Talk about that because I'm so big on education.
Oh man, it's probably the most rewarding experience I've gone through, and I've done a lot. As I said, I've, you know, been to the NBA finals and worked at the NBA draft 8 years and done TV and all these great things. Met a lot of people. Like Warren Legary, who runs Summer League in Las Vegas, reached out to me about 3 years ago about Sports Business Classroom. So Sports Business Classroom is a program that's geared towards educating the next wave of people who want to work in the NBA. Whether you want to be the next salary cap person, scouting video analytics, agent representation, media, all these different majors. And you pick a
Mhm.
major and you come to Las Vegas for a week and we put on programming every day. I mean, we start at like 7 a.m. and we do like office hours with me. So for an hour, you could sit with me. And then throughout the day, we'll do different, like, you know, this year we did the WNBA CBA. We'll do stuff with the Players Association. We'll do programming. Then we have a guest speaker come in every day for at lunchtime. And it's 8 hours of programming every day. And then at night, we do deep dives, which is based on your major. So if you're a salary cap major, you'll come with me for an hour or 2 hours and we'll go through the apron and the extent, like all these different rules and kind of just help you educate. And then at the end of the week, they do the students, and it's not just 20-year-olds, it's people who maybe trying to make a change in their life. Will do a mock trade deadline at the end of the week. And then they'll present on Saturday and then we'll in front of all of us. And it's been, I've texted Warren this and Albert Hall and Sergio.
Mhm.
This every time I get on a plane going home. I've done it 2 years in a row. I said the most rewarding experience in my 30 years. The ability to give back. And I said to when I go up there, I say, but like my goal for you is to put you in a position where you are the next general manager or the next person on TV or the next agent and put you in a position here. Um, because I do think we get to a point where it is so important to give back as far as what we're
I think
doing.
that is so incredible, and the people you mentioned out there, Warren, and they're just great guys, and they've always been about helping people. Tell me this because this is, you know, this our podcast is all over the world, Hoop Genius, and huge in Europe, huge in
Yeah.
Middle East, etc. Um, I'm telling you, how many people are coming to SBC each summer? It is
Oh my God.
remarkable.
It is, it's crazy. So, we had 140 this past, that's, we hit the max capacity. Um, I had my son, my 16-year-old came out and worked, for Warren on, during the games and stuff. And then my wife came out for a couple of days, and it's like if you've never been to Vegas for Summer League, it is one of the most, it's like Comic-Con for people who love like Marvel and all these, all these different things. It is it is a wild experience and stuff like that. But it's the beauty of it is that you can walk the concourse and you could see anybody, and everybody's so approachable. Um, but yeah, it is. It's hey, listen, we're thinking maybe do we try to maybe branch out and do something, during the All-Star week? Do we do something, like we branch out different things? I love to come to Europe and do something, because I do think there's a thirst of knowledge of people who want to learn how these rules work and everything like that. But yeah, it's a terrific program. We haven't started the registration yet, but you can go on sportsbusinessclassroom.com. And we have, as you meant, we have the transaction guide up there. We have, 3 years ago, I put together a CBA 101 where I took the actual CBA and, I don't want to say dumbed it down, but made it more legal, like less legalish. And we kind of explain the rules, and we use real life examples of how the apron works and extensions, all these different things. And that's free. You can download it.
Bobby,
So
if I could, let me ask you one more thing on this. I just want your opinion on outsider, insider view. I think we're going to see a downward trend in salaries for people and stuff. Could you explain why?
Well, yeah, and I think we started to see a
To a
little bit of,
degree, a
yeah,
downward
I
trend.
think we saw a little bit of a trend this past 2 weeks ago with the rookie extensions, where a lot of guys were being pegged in like that 24 to $25 million. What's happened is with the apron is, and so the apron basically it's kind of a quasi hard cap that you can't spend over if you trigger certain things along the way. Players are kind of pegged as far as they're slotted salary wise. The days of having 3 players on your roster making 35% of the cap is over, almost over. So you can have Shea and Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren on your roster, because those guys, even though they're maxed, they're slotted differently. But if you're looking at, hey, how are we going to pay a sixth man? How are we going to pay Alex Caruso? How are we going to pay certain players on your roster? It used to be, well, do we want to just pay the luxury tax? Now it's about building rosters, as far as, if you were Phoenix last year and you had 3 players on max contracts with Durant, Beal, and Booker, and we have no draft picks, what about the other 10 players on our roster? Right. So it's like, well, then we're going to sign minimums every year. And it's like, you just turn this over. And it's the beauty of, I know people get tired of the apron. The beauty of the apron is it has forced teams to really understand roster construction, where you can't just go out and outspend the competition. You can't do what Golden State or maybe the Clippers have done here. And I think that's why we're going, players are still, we're at 5.6 billion in player salaries. We're at 5.2 last year. Players are still going to get paid.
Yes.
But it's going to be different. Like, there's never going to be a summer of 16 where basically we just threw all this money out and guys.
Shout out to Timothy Mozgov.
Yes, the law firm of Mozgov, Noah, and Dang and Biombo made a lot of money. We're not going to see that anymore, because teams are just going to be more careful as far as how they go out how to spend that.
Do you think that then puts a premium on draft picks, because
Yeah.
having players committed to that rookie scale contract now, so the theoretical value of a first round pick or a second round pick in a trade negotiation, for example, do you think that those now have more value in a deal where you could have previously got 2 or 3 picks, and now you're maybe only going to get 1?
Yeah, I wrote about it. We have an article up about what the best, or what we've learned the first week. And one of the things I wrote about was AJ Mitchell in Oklahoma City. So AJ Mitchell gets drafted by the Thunder in the second round 2 years ago. He was on a 2-way. and then they converted him last year. He got hurt during the year, and then they converted him at the end, and then they signed him to a 3-year, almost $9 million deal this year. AJ Mitchell is ranked, I think, second or third in bench points. So among reserves, average like 19 points a game. He's making $3 million. So there is your, like, if you want to try to combat the apron and all these spending things, there you go.
Yeah,
Right?
It's
If you
like
have
Coach and I
well.
talked about Ryan Rollins last week,
Yeah.
and he's starting point guard for the Bucks. He's making $12 million over 3 years.
Yep, exactly. If you can hit on draft picks and second round picks and maybe some of these undrafted guys, and you have them on these manageable salaries, oh my God, it gives you such a. Amen Thompson in Houston, who's on a rookie contract. Suhr and Thompson in Detroit. Like
Wembanyama
those,
on a
I
rookie
mean
deal.
Victor, all right, Victor, for the next 2 years on a rookie deal. Come on.
From your experience in the front office, do you think this is great news for people who work in player development? Because, you're going to make these draft picks, right? And no one knows if they're going to be good or not before they play in the NBA, right? And BJ always used to say on the show, he would say, you're not a GM until you made a bad pick, right?
Yeah.
But if you're a player development guy who specializes, like Chip Engelland, who was with the Spurs, and then I think he's with the Thunder now, do you think now the price of being a player development coach is going to skyrocket because they're going to have to hit, or they're going to have to develop, should I say, the players they do pick with these draft selections?
Oh, I think there's a high premium. I mean, look at the Wizards right now. They have 10 or 11 players on first round rookie contracts. And you got to go 500, right? At least with some five, you got to hit on 5 or 6 of those guys, or you're just going to start the process over again. I think it's great to draft and develop, but how do they basically turn into a NBA player and how does that kind of, like eventually Washington's going to have to be good. Like we just can't keep on doing this over and over and
You'd
stuff
like to
like
think
that.
so.
Yeah. So I do think it puts a premium. OKC of course is a great example because they hit rock bottom after Paul, after the George trade, and then they had Shea, and then they draft Jalen and Shed and add some Case and Wallace and Lou Dort and the undrafted, and those guys, they put a premium on developing. I think the biggest thing is with younger players is don't be afraid to fail. Like experiment with younger players with different lineups, put different players in different positions here. If you're a year where you don't think you are a playoff team or a playing team and you have this young roster, put them in winning positions. Like put them in I'm watching with the Washington Philadelphia last night on a
Great game.
Tuesday. And no offense to CJ McCollum and Chris Middleton. I want to see the younger kids out there. I want to see them in overtime.
Yep.
In a position where the game matters, because what's going to happen likely is we're going to get to March and April. It's basically ping pong balls, right? Like they're going to be out of it likely and stuff. But that's like, you learn a lot about players when the game means a little bit more than it does in April or May, March or April.
If you had to look at all 30 teams right now in the NBA, and you had to look at their cap sheets and the projections for future years, who are some of the teams you say are best positioned and some of the teams you would say are worst positioned based purely financially on the way things are structured and, of course, how it translates to the product on the court?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, some of the teams that are potential lottery teams, I think Utah is really positioned well because they have 8 or 9 guys on rookie contracts and they've got a lot of draft picks and they've got a lot of guys that are going to come off their books. I think Brooklyn, certainly, Charlotte, the Wizards, but I think cap space is a little bit fool's gold. We rarely see players, Paul George was kind of the exception, signing in Philadelphia. I don't know if we're going to get another summer of 2010 when LeBron and Wade and Bosh and Amari and Carlos Boozer and Joe Johnson all went to different teams. So I do think you have to be careful putting all your eggs in a basket cap space wise here. I said, before the injuries, and Miles Turner left, I said Indiana was probably the perfect team to build. How do you build a roster under this CBA where you have 2 players with Halliburton and Siakam making big money, and then everyone else is $20 million or less, and then you still have that flexibility to kind of add. Nemhard, Neesmith, TJ McConnell, players like that. The Thunder are going to be a good case study because they potentially could be a second apron team next year, but where they're different is they could potentially have 4 first-round picks.
Yep.
You can debunk that, right? Like when Lou Dort gets expensive, maybe then you have this guy Cason Wallace, and then when Cason Wallace gets expensive, it might be a pick in 2029. So,
Yep.
although like I think if you're looking at teams that are high cost, you have to look at where they are draft wise, where they are. The Cavaliers will be a good example. Cleveland's the highest paid. Have spent the most money. They've got Donovan and Darius Garland and Jared Allen and Evan Mobley locked up for long term. Their draft picks are a little sketchy there. What happens if they lose in the second round and stuff? That team going to have to be broken up and everything like that. So, that's kind of a lay of the land. I think having the draft picks is certainly important and everything.
Bobby, last question for me is simply this: in your new career, which is now 10 years old, but in your new life, you work 12 months a year on this. But in your NBA life now, give me the most exciting times of the year for you when the action's happening, where you're now this is now where all of your talents get to come in.
Probably the draft and free agency.
Yep.
The trade deadline is
Trade deadline a little bit, yeah.
kind of like that's a little bit hit or miss. And trade deadline is kind of a buildup for from now until February, I guess early February here. I would say that the draft free agency, because there's like the writing component, as you had mentioned, Mo, like the offseason guides we put out there, that being part of the draft coverage. So we start with the combine. One of the things I do on the side with agents where I help their draft prospects prepare when they interview. So we do like 70 guys in like 3 weeks helping prepare. That's a crazy 3-week stretch, like 8 guys a day, hour each, like a lot.
Wow.
The draft, as you said, free agency is crazy because it's like our Super Bowl. We prepare for that, and that can go all summer. So that is probably like that stretch, that April to like mid-July stretch. And then we got Sports Business Classroom 2 in there. It's probably like, and then it's like, the hardest, and this coach is like when you have like, you're doing this and it's like nonstop. And then you get to August and it's like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
It's like the shutdown,
I got
right?
a few weeks off.
Yeah. Like, how do I talk to my wife again? Like, like how do we do that and stuff? So I think for me, that is the most exciting. The early part of the season is exciting for me, and not because of trades and free agency, is because everybody thinks they got a chance.
Yes.
Like it's a clean slate. Nobody's lost 9 games in a row. Nobody's looking at the standings saying, "Oh my God, we got to start tanking." Chicago's 3-0. Like some of these teams that we maybe Charlotte's 2-2. Maybe these teams that we didn't think were great they think they have a chance and stuff.
That is awesome. That's great stuff.
I got a couple questions. One's, for our listeners here. What percentage, if you had to put a percentage on it, how many of the deals done pertaining to trades in the NBA are for financial reasons rather than actual player reasons?
The luxury tax used to be a priority to get under. So we see Team X trading John Smith for nothing, and they're getting under the luxury tax because you're getting a distribution back at the end of the day. I think there is a priority with that as far as there's as you mentioned, there's kind of like that financial component there. There is the Luka trade, for example. Utah, nobody realized if we were on Jeopardy 10 years from now, he said, what was, name the third team involved in the Luka trade to the Lakers, and nobody will probably say the Utah. And why did Utah get involved? Because they were able to pick up some cash and they got a pick. And so I always say like the third team is always the team that kind of is the middleman that always gets the deal done. Charlotte last year is involved in Karl Anthony Towns. They didn't trade for Karl Anthony Towns, but New York had to dump salary to make the money work. And they wound up getting draft 3 seconds in cash and all these other things here. So I think when you're looking at the trades that happen financially related, it's usually that third team that's involved, because sometimes the money doesn't work if you're just doing two teams.
My final question is that Luka trade you just mentioned.
Yeah.
I remember when that happened, I called BJ straight away. I said, BJ, we got to do an episode, right? It was like 3, 4 in the morning, my
Yeah.
time, right?
Yeah.
And I was just about to fall asleep. I got this notification. I
Yeah.
looked at it. I said, this isn't real. All right, check that's real. Call BJ. He didn't believe me. I called Scott. He's at dinner with his wife. I said, Scott, come home right now. And we did it in the emergency episode. But what was your reaction when that trade? Because I think that trade, for as long as the NBA continues for the next thousands of years, if the world survives thousands more years, I don't think we're ever going to see a trade that stunned the entire world like that.
I don't think so. I mean, you never say never in this crazy world. I look back on that week. I remember talking with Shams that week, and he says, yeah, I think Dallas they have something with like the Lakers regarding like Maxi Kleber, like something random. And then we broke a trade that afternoon. It was really a minor trade with the Clippers in Utah. And I remember during the trade deadline week, I'll call him at night and check in with Shams and be like, anything, I need to know, like blah, blah, blah. And I called him at like 11:45 and I said, anything going on? He goes, no, the Knicks Laker game had just finished. And I said, anything? He goes, no, nothing. It's pretty quiet. And then like 10 minutes later, man. And I call him. I'm like, is this real? He's like, this is real. I can't believe it. Like blah, blah, blah. And so I call Luka's agent, who's Bill Duffy and David Mondras. And I go, did your guys just get traded? And they're like, what are you talking about? And I think it just caught, I think the magnitude of the greatness of Luka. Anthony Davis is a heck of a player too. Lakers had just won a game in New York. Luka was up for this Supermax. He gets traded. He doesn't get it. I just think it caught us all. And I think it made people think, and it opened up people's eyes that anybody could be traded in this world. Probably Jokic, probably not, and shit. There's probably a handful of guys.
But Luka was in that category before the trade.
Luka was in that category. Yeah. Like if I was writing my trade guide, I would have him off the board.
Yeah.
And stuff. So
right now, like Wembanyama is the only player that you could say, and even then, after Luka's trade, you never know anymore.
Yeah, and I think, and so that's why, like when we're talking about like the media world and educating people, it would have been easy for me to go on 7 a.m. Sports Center Sunday morning and bash the Mavericks and jump on the hot take parade, right?
Mm.
So I went on there, and I remember doing it, and the producer said, what do you want to talk about? I want to say why this might make sense for Dallas. Will it make sense? Probably not. But I wanted to say, this is why, this is what they're, and that's the goal when I do this, is try to give my vision of like both teams. Yeah. This is why it may make sense for Dallas, where they're going to go big with AD and Derek Lively or Daniel Gafford. They still have Kyrie. They added 2 picks, like all these different things, like. So that is like when you're educating people, it just can't be like a hot take. Worst trade in NBA history. So when we wrote an article, it was actually, I think, the most read article I had last year on ESPN. We wrote an article in April. This is when Luka went back to Dallas, that game. And we wrote what all 30 teams or all 29 teams, what they could have offered in a Luka trade.
Oh, I remember this, yeah.
And it was like kind of like what you've learned and what based on, and it was eye-opening because it wasn't like, because I remember being on TV with Mike Greenberg on Get Up and him saying like anybody could have made the trade. I get it. I understand the rationale, but when you break it down and you look at what every team could have offered, it's not as what you might think and everything like that. So that's, as we said before, like that's when I'm talking on TV or I'm writing, it's like I'm trying to split it down the middle here to give kind of both, the perception of both there.
Well, that's Bobby great. Marks, thank you for your time, sir. We really appreciate you joining us and sharing your insights. It's been absolutely amazing for not just myself as a young person in this industry, but I know all of our listeners at home really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us. So thank you very much. Where can the people check out Sports Business Classroom and where can they check out more of your stuff?
Yeah, you can go on sportsbusinessclassroom.com. You can download both PDFs. As I said, they're free. ESPN.com. You can go on. My Twitter handle is at BobbyMarks42, same as Instagram. So we've got content, videos as soon as we get in the transaction game and everything like that. But you can catch everything there.
And you want to see Bobby in Las Vegas like I'm going to be in July. It's beautiful. It's only about 114 degrees Fahrenheit for our friends over there. They'll enjoy the weather, especially the way it is right now in London.
Inside in Las Vegas, all that air conditioning is colder than London is right now. But appreciate you both, fellas. As I said at the start, we're going to keep bringing you these special guest episodes, so make sure you subscribe, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast from. Make sure you're subscribed to the Hoop Genius podcast so that you never miss a show. I appreciate each and every one of you for listening, and until next time, get buckets.